So we have Ozpin and Glinda discussing things, and we have them having a flashback that explains a few more things about Cinder. And you find out that that opening narration actually was Cinder. So we have Ozpin and Glinda going over things, and they basically start reminiscing about things from the past, back when they attended Beacon. And they start going over the Legend of the Grimm, which is basically the opening narration. And as Glinda starts saying it, then it cuts into the past, and Cinder finishes it, and you find out that, oh no, that opening narration was actually Cinder. Because I just have Jen Taylor recast for Cinder, because that just seems reasonable to me, to have an actually great voice actress voicing your main villain here. And that interruption that Ozpin has, the maybe a more honest soul, I believe it was, there's a whole conversation that spawned from that their team, that Ironwood and Glinda, Cinder and Ozpin end up having this sort of discussion about the various different versions of that that legend. So then we get more flashbacks with them, and specifically you find out exactly how she got found out by Ozpin, and how he reported her. And he tried to make her stop, but she refused, and he reported her, and she ended up running off and meets some sort of mysterious figure, and this will come up in a later story to completely explain that. So the big final climax of the story, we have Winter, that she comes in, and we find out what Cinder's actual plan is. She's been setting up in this ruins that she's going to cast this gigantic fireball to just destroy Beacon. And the thing about this, spell is that, if you hit it with any kind of energy or dust or anything, it basically absorbs it and gets bigger. So no matter what, even if Ironwood's ships fire on it with their energy weapons, it's not going to do much. Bullets aren't going to do anything, and once it's on its trajectory, it's unstoppable. So pretty much, once she finishes and launches it, Beacon's gone. So. But one of the important things here is that Cinder tries to kill Roman because she thinks that he betrayed her. She's gone full paranoid with Roman, so she tries to kill him. He ends up escaping, and she basically calls some of his enemies that she knew about, and basically tells them, where to find Roman. And so she leaves him to that, and then she finds out that Neo just disappears, because Neo's allegiance is to Roman, not to Cinder. So she ends up going through with the plan. I haven't talked as much about Adam, but Adam is involved with a lot of these plots. Anytime I mention the villains, Adam is there. Specifically, we're also introduced to his second-in-command, Nogcon II, and he's a Tiger Faunus, and if you want the inspiration for his character, you can look up The Tiger's Eye by L. Frank Baum. But I'm going to warn you, the story is a little messed up and kind of dark, which fits his character, because he is as extreme as Adam is in the canon Volume 3. And while Adam trusts him, he is far worse than Adam. And Adam ends up having some conflicts with him. We also get a name for the lieutenant. It's Cormoran, which I got that from Jack the Giant Slayer when I was checking out stories. But anyway, so Cinder had the White Fang capture a bunch of Grimm, and she basically ends up dropping them all out on Beacon. So Beacon is basically being overrun by Grimm. So then they're all freaking out. So they're fighting all these Grimm. So this is all just this big distraction. So no one notices Cinder doing this giant fireball, way off. And she also is using illusions and magic to disguise it. I mentioned magic is actually something that really starts becoming a bigger part of the story, because I end up going full tilt with the magic. So what's important here is that Penny goes to RWBY, and she's like, I'm sensing a bunch of energy over there. And she's just like, we don't see anything. And then RWBY looks, and she kind of squints, and she starts seeing this big fireball. And she's like, yeah, there's something crazy over there, because her silver eyes. So she takes Team RWBY out, and they go out there and track him down. So basically, a lot of the main characters, Team RWBY and Team Juniper, end up going out there to those ruins following RWBY. And there's a bunch of fights there. And we actually see that Neo breaks into the CCT, and she's actually not even doing anything for Cinder. She's just looking for Roman. But Ozpin comes in, and he has Kilroy there, and there's some other characters, but these guys end up fighting Neo, but then all of a sudden Ozpin throws his cane, and it basically ends up like splitting out like that, and it traps Neo against the wall, and they're just like, well, we didn't see her. And then she ends up teleporting out, and then Ozpin gets his cane. He just smashes the the illusion of Neo, because he's like he's like, that was a trick. So they basically make sure that the CCT is all right. So Ozpin starts heading out, and they're just like, okay, where are you going? He's like, I'm going over there, and they're just like, we don't see anything. But you see, from Ozpin's perspective, you see a giant fireball, and this is where people start putting two and two together. That Ozpin's, he's got silver eyes too. Anytime you see the yellow or other color, that's basically just illusions he has Glinda cast on him, so that people don't always see his silver eyes. So we get a bunch of fights in the ruins. In particular, you have Yang fighting Adam. You have RWBY finally gets a proper fight with Cinder. There's a lot going on. I won't go into all the little details, because there's a lot of fighting in this finale. There's like a couple episodes of it. But importantly, Cinder targets Pyrrha, and she, fires a big fiery arrow at her, and Jean ends up, seeing it and tries to warn her, but she gets hit by it, and there's this gigantic inferno, and everyone thinks that Pyrrha died. So then everyone's freaking out. Jean loses it, so then Cinder's just like, ha, the great Pyrrha Negos is dead. Because as I established in the Cinder video, Cinder has an inferiority complex, and Pyrrha ends up becoming a target of this just because she's naturally talented. That's really it. That's her greatest sin. But then Pyrrha's sword, which had fallen, flies into the fire, and Pyrrha walks out of the fire, and you see that she's got this yellow aura around her. And when you actually see Pyrrha walk out of the fire, I'm borrowing a little bit of imagery from Dead Fantasy there, but she realizes that she's got this yellow aura around her, and she's like, Jean, this is your semblance. And so she finds out that, oh wow, he can actually, put that shield around other people, so that's how she survived. So Pyrrha's just like, okay, no more messing around. So then she ends up fighting all out, and everyone's up fighting all out, but ultimately the good guys lose. They get their butts kicked. Adam ends up going to fight RWBY, but then Penny jumps in to fight him and gets her almost completely just wrecked. Even Adam doing his special attack, and he ends up cutting Penny's arm off, and he ends up smashing her face to where you can see like all the the robotics underneath, and Penny's just telling RWBY, you need to get out, everyone get out, I'll stay here and I'll fight him. And then RWBY's like, I won't leave you. And then she's like, don't worry about me, RWBY, I'm combat ready. As you see, she's losing it, she lost an arm, half her face is missing, and she ends up fighting Adam, and ends up just getting straight up cut in half, like, horizontally. So, RWBY, tries to get people and leave, and then Hei Long ends up coming back and trying to help get them out. And then Penny, part of her, ends up jumping on Adam, and she's just like, salutations, and blows herself up. And unfortunately, Adam's semblance, which you do discover is absorbing various types of energy and non-physical attacks, and he can use that to strike back. Yeah, he just absorbs it and just tanks the entire explosion. So Penny's gone, and RWBY's upset. But then when all hope seems lost, Yang jumps up and activates her semblance after getting the crap kicked out of her. She just like straight up DBZ transformation, just like shattering rocks. Just ends up fighting, and she would have beaten Adam if her body didn't end up breaking, quite literally. Like, her limbs end up breaking just because of the sheer amount of power she has. Because this is the limitation of her power. There is, if she takes too much damage, the power she builds up with her semblance is simply too much for her body to handle. So her arms end up breaking. It's pretty bad. So they think they're all gonna lose, and then Ozpin shows up, and so Adam tries to use his semblance on Ozpin. Ozpin one just blocks it. One hit KOs him, shattering his mask. Emerald and Mercury try to fight him. He just tosses them aside. And as a side note, his fighting style is based off of Wing Chun. So he ends up fighting them and just whooping everyone. And ultimately he has a big confrontation with Cinder. And this ultimately ends with him pushing her far enough to where they she tries to launch the fireball, but ultimately Ozpin with some of the other people who were there, they basically, the solution, they couldn't stop the fireball. They end up just they end up firing it with Weiss, trying to use her glyphs, and they end up firing it just straight up right into space, and it explodes in space. And then Cinder's just like, all those years of build-up just gone, and then Adam basically grabs her and he's just like, no, we have to go, we have to retreat. So then they end up retreating. Ozpin gets all the students onto a transport and they end up making it back to Beacon while everything gets cleared up there. And so we get this nice epilogue where Ozpin is talking to all the students, and he apologizes that they basically got dragged into his personal business. He makes sure that makes sure that Yang gets to a hospital and gets healed. So RWBY, asks Ozpin about the silver eyes, and then Crow's there, and Crow reveals that he has silver eyes too, being related to her, and that's just something that runs in the Rose family. So she talks about it, and you learn a little bit more about that. And then basically it sets up where the villains have escaped, and it ends with Roman getting the crap kicked out of him by his former these enemies that Cinder called on him. And then Neo comes in, kicks their butts. She gives Roman his cane and his hat back and hands him a cigar and sort of helps him up to get to one of their safe houses. And that's basically Volume 3. I didn't go over everything. There's a lot of little stuff that I didn't talk about, particularly with development of characters like Blake and Sun or Neptune and Weiss, because there's nice little development of their relationships, but that wasn't as important to talk about. So moving on to Volume 4, we established that Cinder, she has a couple more plans, but at this point she's kind of on like Plan E, since things have been not going her way. So kicking off the new semester, we have another RWBY versus Juniper fight. This time it's actually part of a class from Glinda, and they're basically one side's the good guy, one side's the bad guy, and Team RWBY ends up losing. While Yang is healed up, she's still kind of recovering, so she couldn't go all out. RWBY's bummed about what happened with Penny, and so she really wasn't focused in the fight. But then as they're sort of walking back, RWBY talks about Penny, and she's just like talking about just how she still isn't over what happened, and they're trying to comfort her. Then all of a sudden you hear a "Salutations, Team RWBY," and then RWBY's like, "I can still hear her voice," and then they're like, "No, we heard that too," and they turn around, and then Penny shows up, and she's like, she gives RWBY a hug, and she's just like, "Penny, you blew up." "Yes, I did. This is my backup body." She's like, "Oh, you're silly. Why didn't you think I had a backup?" And then it's all of a sudden, oh, yeah, that makes sense why she was so chill about blowing herself up, because she had a backup, and she just uploaded her mind to Ironwood's ship. So, she just downloaded it into a new body. And this is actually where we're introduced properly to Penny's father, Isaac Norman Polendina. And he's, middle-aged. He's got the same red hair as her, but it's, obviously, he's got some grays. And he had come from Atlas specifically to oversee, he's the one who brought in her backup body and oversaw the procedure of, re-uploading her mind to it. And, so he had worked out that she could stay at Beacon, but he's a little, he's nervous because he's a little paranoid. So he has, he lets her stay there, but he has some techs follow her. And it'll be these two people that we saw in the Volume 2 opening. So he also has Seal there overwatching Penny, and there's no secret that she's a robot at this point. Like, just no one's even bothering to try to hide it. And so he has them watching out for Penny, just making sure nothing bad happens to her and making sure she doesn't do anything stupid. So an interesting thing in this season is actually that Yang goes to Ozpin, and after having seen him fight and seeing his fighting style, because Ozpin didn't actually fight with his cane back in Volume 3, and so he fought hand-to-hand with Cinder. So Yang saw this, and she wants to learn this style. So Ozpin ends up teaching her, his style of fighting, and this will be incorporated into Yang's fighting style, because occasionally she'll start doing some Wing Chun style techniques, and this will also be helpful. Training with Ozpin and learning the style is going to help her mellow out a bit, and so this will help her move from, try to control herself a little bit more, so she doesn't get really pissed off, or when she does get pissed off, she's able to be more focused. And that's going to be good for her character. And I'm just going to say that's going to go throughout the season. We also have Ozpin going to RWBY and talking to her about her silver eyes again, and he basically reveals officially to her that, I have silver eyes too. And he's like, and I'll train you, but, we'll also have Crow train you as well. So he basically says, he specifically wants her to train with her silver eyes, and, Crow can't always be around, but he wants to have Crow train her, but when Crow's not around, Ozpin will train her with the silver eyes so that she basically can learn more abilities. So the major arc of the season features a transfer student coming into Beacon named Min Dex, and he seems a little odd. He has weird quirks, feels almost sort of animalistic. A lot of suspicions that he's actually a faunus, but no one can quite figure that out. RWBY instantly suspects him, no, there's something wrong with him, and, gotta get to the bottom of this. So RWBY ends up becoming, at first, a little sort of paranoid, but she sort of develops into, a detective. She's trying to figure it out, and she ends up recruiting Sun and Neptune into her detective schemes, and she ends up dragging a bunch of people in this arc, trying to figure out what's up with Min Dex. So this is going to go for several episodes, while the main actual storyline of this, featuring Weiss, runs. So Weiss ends up sort of causing this flurry of snow, and she's just like, well, I don't think I had any ice dust here, and she didn't use any glyphs. And she's just like, what's happening? So she's running around with this little flurry, just who do I talk to about this? She ends up running to Oobleck, and she's like, Oobleck, what's going on here? I didn't have any dust. And he's basically like, can you do actual magic? And she's just like, oh, what? And he basically is explaining that it seems that she's capable of doing magic. So he takes her to Ozpin, and they basically figure out that, yeah, you can straight up do magic. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, it's, so, we pretty much figured that with your glyphs. And she's like, but that's my semblance. And then Glinda's just like, she does semblances too. And she's just like, and they're like, no, glyphs are typically just straight up magic. And she's like, then why did Winter tell me that was my semblance? So then they reveal that, no, that's not her semblance at all, that she can just straight up do magic, and she has actually been doing magic this whole time, but she just didn't realize it. So she ends up talking to Winter about this, and she finds out that Winter had lied to her because their father didn't like magic at all. So when Winter started doing it, he beat her for it, and so she managed to play it off as a semblance, using the glyphs, and that's what she taught Weiss. So she taught Weiss that these glyphs are your semblance, so that she wouldn't get in trouble. And so she's like, I'm sorry, but I did this to protect you. So now that she discovered that, Ozpin is talking to her, and he's like, you obviously are very skilled with these glyphs and this magic, and we want to see if you're willing to use this to fight Cinder. So she's like, why can't Glinda do it? And then you find out that Glinda, while she knows a few glyphs, she really doesn't know much about magic. The experiences with Cinder and her getting arrested because of dark magic kind of spooked her, and she never really delved too deeply into magic, mostly relying on her semblance. So they've seen that you're obviously far more skilled when it comes to glyphs and actual magic. So we'll have Oobleck help you, because Oobleck has researched into magic. So he can't do magic, but he does know a lot about it. So he sort of ends up helping Weiss out as she starts learning this magic, and they try to figure out a way to fight Cinder. And they eventually end up finding a way. I'll speed up this whole arc in that we learn about Oobleck a little bit. we learn about a little bit of his past and his character. Weiss does end up opening up about her parents, particularly with how her father treated her, like, finding out things like the scars she has on her face were actually caused by her father, since he's a sword fighter too. He taught Weiss until, he scarred her face on purpose, because she wasn't, performing properly. So then Winter took her away, and she's like, I'll train her. And so Oobleck ends up becoming like a father figure to Weiss, which is, it's a little weird for her at first because she's never had that kind of relationship before, not even with her own father. But, Oobleck's, he's kind, he's supportive, he's very helpful. Ultimately, he does want the best for Weiss, and he's always helping her out, with trying to figure things out with this magic and trying to come to terms with this. So she ends up seeing him as a bit more of a father figure to her. So that's going to be a little important, but it's really important for her character that she does have a figure like that in her life. They end up finding a spell that could work. It'll encase anything in this indestructible crystal. It's very dangerous, and for something as large as a person, it could very well kill the person using it, which is the serious element of this for Weiss. So that's why they end up working on that for the rest of the season, to try to figure out how to get that to work. So in the Min Dex plotline, he ends up meeting Penny, and Penny thinks his weird quirks, almost animalistic nature, is hilarious, and she ends up becoming friends with him. And a lot of the other people, like Yang and Nora and stuff, they end up becoming friends with Min Dex, so they think he's pretty chill. He's generally pretty chill. He just occasionally insists that he needs to go meet Ozpin, but he can't. So RWBY continues her investigation, and they can't really find anything that's concrete to prove that he's bad, other than the fact that he acts weird, and that's not really proof that he's evil. But eventually, near the end of this arc, you have him finally seeing Ozpin, and all of a sudden he freaks out and just screams Ozpin's name, and Ozpin, and then he turns into a Grimm. Then Min Dex turns into a Grimm, and then he goes and attacks Ozpin, but, hearing the name, Ozpin, got warned, and he ends up dodging the attack and starts beating up on this Grimm. So the teachers all like swarm, like the students all like pull out their weapons and they're ready to kill it. But then, Team RWBY, who they saw this and they were jumping in front of him, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Even RWBY starts, questioning what's going on. But the rest of Team RWBY, the people who become friends with him, they stop it and they're like, no, 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 there's something weird that had happened here. And because this Grimm, it's an Ursa. This Grimm had just been like begging for its life, and they're just like, is this Grimm talking? And eventually, Weiss ends up coming in, and she uses a spell to to try to heal him. Ends up restoring him to this his human form. And they're basically like, oh, so Cinder must have captured you and turned you into a Grimm somehow. And he's just like, I am a Grimm. I was turned into a human. And they're all just sitting there like, what? And Ironwood comes in. He's just like, arrest him. Arrest this man. So he goes to try to interrogate him, and you do find out, Ozpin comes in. Dr. Dupin is very interested, so they end up talking to Min Dex, and they learn a bit more. And this is going to be this is a plotline that I was really not sure about at first until I talked to some people, and they were actually interested in this. So you'll find out that Grimm are creatures born from magic, and their minds sort of develop along the lines of whatever form they're in, which, bird, it's basically like a bird, elephant, it's like an elephant, and, Grimm are obviously smarter than your average animals, but they're still very animalistic. But being given the form of a human, Min Dex was able to develop into the mind of a human, which ultimately caused him to feel more sympathetic towards humans and not just want to kill and eat them all and rip them apart. So this is really, I know a lot of people want to see more insight to the Grimm, and this is really how you get that with Min Dex as a character. And he'll come back, and eventually he'll be able to transform at will between his Grimm form and his human form. And there's, that's going to be more relevant. But for the rest of this volume, he's being held in maximum security prison by Ironwood. But there is a nice scene where you see that Penny goes, and she basically uses her connections to go and visit him in prison to go talk to him. Because, as far as she is concerned, he's her friend. So, you know, that's nice, that Min Dex has someone to talk to when Penny visits. So we get a bit of a short arc featuring the dance, and it's like the dance in Volume 2, except it's only going to be like a couple episodes, and it's not even going to be mostly focused on the dance. You're going to get a lot of stuff from the villains. In particular, you have Emerald and Mercury kind of talking to each other like, hey, not quite sure we have good job security here with Cinder, and even Emerald, who you do find out was, rescued off the streets by Cinder, so she feels some loyalty to Cinder, is starting to feel like, yeah, I feel like we're kind of expendable. She was working with Roman for several years, and she turned on him in an instant. She doesn't care about Neo disappearing, and she's openly stated that she doesn't particularly care for what happens to Adam as long as he helps her. So they're both starting to sweat a little bit like, yeah, maybe this isn't the best job. And they get some mysterious message, and they end up leaving for a bit. And this is important for later on. The dance, you see some of the characters are at the dance, except for like Weiss, who insists on working with Oobleck during this time. Some of the characters are there, but Team Coffee finally gets to go to the dance, and they're glad about that. Coco especially, since she had planned a good amount of the dance from last year, she's just finally glad to be at a dance and be able to see the fruits of her labor from planning it. And this is just a nice character interactions and characters talking to each other. Overall, nothing really important happens with this, except for setting something up later on. So moving into the final arc of Volume 4, we have Cinder talking to Adam that she's going to need him to go awaken a dragon. And they're like, is that a metaphor for something? And she's like, oh no, it's a literal dragon. It's a grim dragon. And yeah, so there's build up an explanation about the dragon that shows up, and it doesn't just pop out of nowhere. So there's a good chunk of an episode dedicated to her going and finding this this dragon. So they set up the White Fang, Emerald, and Mercury in Mountain Glen. They go back there to that desolate place, and they just sort of set up a temporary base while Cinder goes out to get the dragon with Adam. So one of the important things is that Roman, in the beginning of this arc, actually goes to Beacon, and he tries to strike up a deal. And then they're basically like, okay, no, we're arresting you. And he's like, whoa, no, I can offer you information to fight Cinder. So he strikes a deal with Ozpin to get his record and 3 other people's records cleaned, just wiped clean, as if they never committed any crimes. And he'll give them everything they need to know on Cinder. And they reluctantly agree. Even the Veil government reluctantly agrees that we'd rather deal with Roman Torchwick than Cinder Fall. So Cinder basically teleports out with Adam to that big island that you see on the Remnant map, and she goes to where the lair of this dragon is, but she comedically forgets the words to get into the magic words that will open up the door. So she basically is like, okay, we're just gonna have to do this by force. So she has to wake up the dragon doing this magic thing going on, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna need you to use your semblance to protect me. Why? She's like, because it's going to attack us. So they wake up the dragon. It bursts out of this mountain that it's in, and then it breathes fire, and Adam absorbs it, and Cinder eventually tames it and gets control of it, and she gets on it, and Adam gets on it, and they fly it back to Mountain Glen. There's this huge dragon. So then they all get ready to go and just attack Beacon. Just everyone flying, just destroy Beacon. So she's going to use this giant freaking dragon to just wreck and just destroy Beacon. And that's really her plan. She's like, this is her little last-ditch effort. So they do it, they go and attack, and then there's a huge battle at Beacon. Everyone fights this dragon. There's a huge fight, and they have to use all sorts of strategies to try to get this dragon down. And eventually they do kill it, and then Cinder's like, oh crap, I'm pretty much out of plans. So she tries to teleport back, and Jean gets everyone, he orders them to, Team Juniper to go after her. And Weiss and Glinda basically use their powers to widen the teleportation glyph that Cinder's trying to use to encompass more people than just her. So several people get teleported, and there's a big fight. Pyrrha has a proper fight with Cinder here, where she uses her semblance to pick up a building, because they end up going back to Mountain Glen, but you do see more Mountain Glen than there was in Volume 2. And so, yeah, Pyrrha fights her, and she ends up literally lifting a building. She rips a building off the foundation and just throws it at Cinder. She's just like, Pyrrha's effing pissed. So there's a big fight going on, and RWBY, using her silver eyes, actually sees, and she kind of tracks them, you know, over to Mountain Glen. So they basically like, okay, let's go up and load up and get to Mountain Glen immediately. So several of the characters end up taking it, you know, ships out to Mountain Glen, and the dragon, which does have the same abilities as, you know, creating more Grimm, and they're trying to clean up that problem at Beacon. So several of the characters get out there, and I forgot to mention this, but Jean also discovers that his semblance gives him the ability to heal, which is something hinted as far back as Volume 1. And this basically cements his character as very much a support role for Team Juniper. It fits into his theme of wanting to protect people and not wanting to be the one being protected. He wants to get back to his team. And during the fight, Ren fights Adam and ends up just getting stabbed through the chest. And they're like, oh crap. So then we have Nora's turn to basically use her semblance, and you know, she charges up her semblance because she can charge it up on her own, but it just doesn't have the, you know, the same amount of control ability that it does if she takes in electricity, because she can measure that, but when she's charging it up, it can go over the top, and it actually gets to the point where it's detrimental to her health and can even stop her heart. So she does this, and she supercharges, and she just goes out and starts beating the crap out of everyone, and Adam just like freaking gets decked out of there. And but you know, everyone else gets there, and you know, Jean goes up and he heals Ren, and then Nora, you know, seeing that Ren's okay, she, you know, she's happy as she falls over dead. Her heart is stopped. So so a lot of the fight goes, you know, I'm kind of skipping a lot of the fight. This is pretty much at the end. So, you know, they're like, oh crap, what do we do? And Ren's trying to give her, you know, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So Ren's trying to give her Nora CPR, and then John ends up seeing, you know, the hammer, and it's electrifying. He tries to touch it, and it zaps him, and then he uses his semblance to grab it, and he ends up just hitting Nora and electrocuting her and defibrillating her, because, you know, of course that works, and she ends up, you know, breathing again. Her heart, you know, starts beating, and you know, Ren's happy, and they're all happy. So Adam is just like, he got his butt kicked, and he's like, he orders a full retreat of the White Fang, and they're like, no, we're getting out of here. He's like, yeah, sorry, Cinder, like this isn't worth it. Now, one of the best parts about this is that in the middle of the fight, Roman shows up. And Cinder's just like, okay, Mercury Emerald, kill him. Just, I'm sick of seeing his face. So then they walk over, and then Roman hands them 2 briefcases, and then they check it, and they're just, you know, and they stand next to Roman, and Cinder's like, what's going on? And then Roman's like, you'll find that your henchmen are under new management. And then Cinder realizes what just happened, that Roman paid them off. And she's just like, you betrayed me? And then Mercury's like, well, we felt that it was better to work for Roman because, well, the pay is better. He's definitely not actually going to kill us. And he offers dental. She's like, really? And they're like, dental is very important. You know, Emerald and Mercury are very insistent that the dental is important. So when they disappeared before, or earlier from that message, that was actually Roman contacting them. So they end up sort of just chilling out on the sidelines watching everyone else fight. Well, with Neo. So at the end of the fight, Cinder's pretty much alone. Everyone's abandoned her. Her revenge schemes have brought her to ruin. So she has one last fight with Ozpin, Ironwood, and Glinda, while Weiss ends up sort of prepping for this crystal spell that, you know, that had been building up for a good chunk of the season. And, you know, they wear her down to the point where her aura is, you know, down really low, and then she casts the spell on Cinder, and ultimately, you know, she gets crystallized, and it's kind of a heart-wrenching moment because, Cinder, who was so powerful before, is reduced to, crawling on the ground, trying to, still trying to kill Ozpin, and ultimately ends up just totally frozen. When I came up with this, I was like, this kind of makes me think of the scene where Katara freezes Azula. But so they're all kind of sad, and then everyone kind of ends up leaving. They can't move the crystal because it's frozen in place. So then Ozpin's actually really sad about that everything had come to this, because he tried to talk to Cinder out of this, but she was just too she was too mad and too obsessed with revenge. So it ends up ending establishing that Roman forms a team with Neo, Emerald, and Mercury. Team Roman. Roman, Mercury, Emerald, Neo. So they're going to be sort of a group that, they do dastardly things throughout the rest of the show. And then we also see that Adam gets back to the White Fang headquarters, and he's getting some dirty looks for calling that full retreat. And Nog starts really mentioning to Cormoran that he's like, he doesn't think that Adam is really suited for this role, but he says that he can't challenge Adam because Adam's so much stronger than him. So but it's sort of showing that there's this growing sentiment in the White Fang that Adam, his days may be numbered in the White Fang, but his concern was really the the safety of his men. That he's like, he wasn't gonna have them all charge in suicidal like that, because especially working under Cinder, how they almost got killed before, like he didn't want to risk that. This is going to be building up for things for his character arc. Then you'd see some more of a hints at villains that are going to show up in the next volume. But really, that's about it for Volume 4. I'm leaving out a lot of the all the main characters talking to each other and everything. But yeah, that's pretty much how I would handle Volume 4. So yeah, I know this video is kind of long, talking about Volumes 3 and 4, because I literally went through whole seasons. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I changed. Basically, I changed literally everything. A lot of this stuff is going in. This is how I envisioned things would go after I watched Volume 2. And yeah, I've been spending a lot of time writing this, and I'm not completely done, particularly with Volume 4. With Volume 3, I skipped a ton of stuff. This would literally be a 4-hour video if I went over everything in Volume 3. Yeah, I mean, I do have the whole series planned out, like all the way up to Volume 12. Yeah, so I have more story to tell, and there's a lot more to talk about when it delves into like the actual lore, because I have a whole massive 15-page timeline of the actual history of Remnant. But yeah, that's stuff to talk about another day. So yeah, I'm just gonna end this right here because this video is long enough. So if you want to submit a topic to me, if you're on YouTube, you can simply comment below, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And thank you for watching.